Hey Randy, when we think about what Sean Strickland did to win the championship when he was considered such an underdog, and then what Francis Ngannou did when the boxing community, me included, a couple of both sports, didn't give him any shot really and thought he was going to get embarrassed. What does that say about the caliber of coaching in this facility to be able to pull off performances and results like that?
Yeah, I just think we've created a unique environment where these athletes can, our motto is check your ego at the door. It's only going to get in the way. And these guys do that. We have an amazing staff, and an amazing group of guys. It's a family in here. Iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. That's exactly what we do in here every single day. And I think that shows. We don't just focus on the physical skills that we develop and coming up with game plans and all that, but dialing in the psychological skills, the mental skills it takes to deal with the adversity of fighting is all part of the package here at Xtreme Couture. Eric, Ryan, Dennis Davis, the staff here, Gil Gordado, right on down the line, they've all either been fighters and understand what it's all about, or they Nate, I mean, there's just so many guys in here that throw it all out there and are willing to give until sometimes it hurts.
Kenny asked you about like the boxing legends that were around last weekend. Did you make any friends in boxing that weekend? Did you hang out with any of them?
Man,
have any
hanging out with Roy Jones and Slim and having Duran photo bomb me and jump into one of my videos. It was surreal. It was a really fun experience. Michael Spinks, at the big dinner, sitting with Michael Spinks and it was just almost surreal hanging out with all those guys, and the warmness that they embraced us with was really cool. It was great.
We had Ray Sefo in here earlier and asked him, how likely we could see a super fight pay-per-view headliner with Kayla Harrison and Chris Cyborg should the acquisition of Bellator go through. If that was available in 2024, there's rumours of a 2-fight deal with Deontay Wilder and Francis Ngnannou, maybe having one of those in the PFL Smart Cage. Considering all of the possible options that could be available to PFL, what's the one super fight you'd like to see?
I think Kayla and Cyborg is one that everybody's talked about for a while now, and that would be an amazing fight, honestly, and to witness Kayla's journey, from just being a judoka, arguably the best judoka we've ever produced, but her transition and her willingness to put herself out there in some uncomfortable spots and answer all the questions and progress as fast as she has to the athlete that she is. I think Cyborg would be an amazing test for her. And I know that she's chomping at the bit to get back in there, and I'm excited to see her back on the card against Julia Budd in the finals. I know she wanted to be in this season, and she wants Pacheco back for sure, but it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I was very impressed with Deontay Wilder when we interviewed him at the playoffs in New York, and his willingness to genuinely consider stepping in that smart cage and making the transition and trying his hand at MMA is I think, a tribute to the warrior spirit that he's walking around with. He's a formidable athlete. Give him the time to learn some of the MMA that he needs to learn to be able to compete in that smart cage, and I think he's going to do well.
What do you mentioned about like starting in MMA in the 90s and the 30 years since? It's like the rise of women's MMA and having headliners like Kayla and Chris Cyborg. Is that kind of one of the things that's maybe not taken as a surprise, but is that one of the stories of the 30 years that you've been involved in the sport, seeing the rise of women's MMA?
I think it's important that we embrace having a female counterpart. I think it's something that we needed to do in wrestling for a long time, and now it's a full metal sport. We have over 30 colleges that have collegiate wrestling. Title IX has decimated the Olympic sports for men across the board. Rather than raise funds to create women's opportunities, is what Title IX was supposed to do, they did the easy thing, which is slash men's sports to be in compliance with the gender equity federal legislation. And that wasn't what it was meant to do, was take away men's opportunities. It was meant to create women's opportunities. So having a female counterpart in both the sport of wrestling and the sport of fighting, I think is very, very important. And we need to embrace that, recognize the diligence and the commitment that these ladies have to our sport. A lot of times they're the fight of the night because there's almost another layer of the onion. They have to prove something else, like they deserve to be there. And so they let it go. They're wide open, and I like that. I respect that. So I think we have to embrace that. I think it's important for the longevity of both of our sports.
I think men's heavyweight is quite a unique weight class. I think like a power shot can go take you all the way around the world, really. So what advice would you give Deontay, considering he's already got that, he showed that in boxing, what advice would you give, or have you already given Deontay Wilder to kind of, he's not going to be able to master various facets of MMA in a short space of time, but what are the things that he would need to add to his game plan to be...
He's got to start grappling and wrestling. He needs to figure out how to protect himself if he gets taken down. He needs to learn how to sprawl and counter takedowns. It's exactly what Sodabu's been doing, exactly what Francis has been doing. Sodabu for the last 2 years recognized that glaring weakness in his game as a formidable, long, rangy striker. If guys took him down or tied him up, he had trouble there, and that cost him some fights. And I think that's exactly what Deontay needs to be looking at, is immersing himself in an MMA gym somewhere, being willing to take some lumps, get submitted, figure out what this kicking thing and elbows, well, obviously not elbows in the PFL, but still the rules of engagement are completely different to boxing, and that changes the striking. And you have to learn where you're in danger and where you're not, and how to counter and use your hips and your long levers effectively to keep fights standing and make guys box him. That's the key for him.
Yeah.
If he can develop some defensive wrestling skills a la Chuck Liddell and make guys stand with him, there's going to be a lot of people that have a big problem.
We saw Holly Holm have, she came from
Holly's
boxing,
a perfect example of somebody who's done just that and spent some time developing those tactics and using her wrestling in a defensive manner to make people fight her where she wants to fight.
Okay. Thanks, Randy.
You bet.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, guys.
I'm recently over in Saudi Arabia. I wanted to get your thoughts on that whole setup, the whole spectacle, and let alone Francis's performance over there.
Man, I got involved in this sport in 1997. I've been to a lot of fight shows, boxing and MMA, and I think to date, probably the biggest, most spectacular fight show I'd ever been to was one of the Prides in Satayama Super Arena. I was cornering Dan Henderson. They had a huge big screen with a waterfall that came over the big screen and these Japanese drummers and this crazy spectacle of a show. It was probably the best show I think I'd ever seen. It was like, wow, until last Saturday. And that setup from start to finish, and I think some of the best boxers certainly in the last 30 years were all there. It was truly remarkable. The undercard all took place outside in a beautiful setup. The weather was amazing in the 70s. It was wonderful. A lot of knockouts, a lot of great fights, street title fights on the undercard. And then we move indoors. I'm like, where are we going? What the heck? Why would we do this out here? This is cool. Until you walk into this brand new arena they built in 3 months for this event. We're sitting in the front row. They're like, hey, this stage is actually going to move. And when it moves, you might want to watch your feet. I'm like, you guys have tested this, right? But it was insane. At first, you're like, am I at a concert or am I at a fight? It was remarkable. The setup, the light show, the drop screens, the big screen with Francis and Fury's face all over them, the pyro. I mean, it was spectacular. And then the stage moves and the ring comes up out of the ground, and we're just like, what the heck? This is unbelievable. Michael Buffer was really funny. He's like, man, I hope you don't expect me to be in that ring when that thing comes up. It was a great show. They did a spectacular job of putting it all together. I felt very welcome with all the boxers. They embraced, there was 6 of us from MMA over there, and they embraced us in amazing fashion. Took us in as part of the brotherhood, if you will. It was just a great event. Really, really spectacular.
You mentioned that, it has to be kind of maybe surreal. Did you get ever starstruck at a moment when you're looking around and seeing the boxing legends all around you?
It was just really, really cool. I don't know that I was starstruck, but just to see all those faces, all those people. I grew up watching boxing, and then many of those guys came from that golden era of boxing, and Duran, and I mean right on down the line. It was a who's who from the boxing world for sure. And from start to finish, just an amazing experience.
We'll talk about just the fight itself. How did you score it at the end?
Well, I had Francis winning, but obviously I'm a little biased. Francis trains in here. He does his MMA training in here. We've watched his progression since he's come here, 4 years ago. and it's been amazing to see the diligence, the work ethic, all the things that he brings to this. That humbleness, and willingness to put himself out there in some uncomfortable places to get better, all in the name of trying to be the best. And look where he's at. I obviously thought he did enough to win that fight. He landed the most power shots. He was the aggressor for a lot of those rounds. I think he got a little tired in the 6th, 7th, and 8th, but came back strong in the 9th and 10th round, and obviously the 3rd round knockdown, I think, shocked everybody. I think everybody jumped to their feet and didn't sit back down for quite a while after that. So it was a great performance by him. A split decision, honestly, either way is a win, certainly for MMA, for the PFL, and for Francis. So he shocked the world on Saturday night.
Did you get a chance to talk with him afterwards? And if you did, what sort of things did you say to him?
Yeah, I didn't get near him. There was, you can imagine the mob scene after all of that. So I haven't had a chance to see him or talk to him since all that went down.
And we've seen crossover fights that happened before that didn't happen so well, and then we see Francis go out there and put on such a good sport. Do you think that now we're going to see more of these crossover fights because we've seen now an MMA guy represent the, I guess, MMA well?
Yeah, I think the door's opened. Obviously, Jake Paul opened that door a while back. The only guy that's come the other way has been James Toney in 2008, and as a top-level boxer trying his hand at MMA. So I'm anxious to see if we get another top-level boxer that wants to try his hand in the smart cage, make his way in there. I think you give him the time to get their feet under him, learn the other things, just like Francis has been doing for the last 3 or 4 years, learning that part of the game. And I think that's what James didn't spend enough time doing, is learning some MMA. It's a different, they're apples and oranges in many, many ways.